Hey everybody, it's Dr. Will Pulgarin, and I'm the implementation specialist here at Thinking Nation. And my goal today is to talk about Thinks. And for those of you that are not familiar with Thinks, the goal of this presentation is to walk you through it, to take you on how you can use this with your students and in your classroom. So Thinks essentially is a document analysis tool. And now Thinking Nation has a platform with all these resources and that I'm going to go into. But today we're going to focus on Thinks. And Thinks is a document analysis tool aimed at helping students analyze the essential steps of primary sources. But here at Thinking Nation, we've also made, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, document analysis sheet for secondary sources, multiple sources, and visual sources. And so primary sources, we all know as history teachers, they're important to the teaching of history. But if you just put a primary source in front of a student, they're going to struggle. They don't know, they don't always know what's the most important information that I need to get out of it. Sometimes the language trips them up. Sometimes they're not sure what to focus on. And so you could put a primary source document in front of them, and without a Thinks document analysis or without an analysis sheet, they don't really know how to attack it or extract the most important information from the document. And so what Thinks does is it gives teachers the tools to do that. Now, primary sources can include political cartoons, and we know that in history, U.S., world, and government, political cartoons are a big part of learning. When I was teaching U.S. history, I used political cartoons at least once a week in my classroom. Posters, maps, videos, documents, artifacts, photos, and sound recordings. And all these are primary sources, and Thinks works for all of them. And so Thinks is a tested and proven strategy that we developed here at Thinking Nation to help your students process document analysis. And so the way it works is you choose the primary source or secondary source or the document that you want the students to analyze. And we have a huge library of that on our Thinking Nation website. But you choose the source. And let's say you want the students to analyze the Gettysburg Address or a chunk of the Gettysburg Address. And so you give them that chunk or the Gettysburg Address, and you give them the Think sheet, and they use the Think sheets to analyze or to extract the most important information from the reading. Now, Thinks is an acronym, and it stands for T, the targeted audience. So who was the targeted audience of this document? Going back to the Gettysburg Address, we know that Abraham Lincoln during the Gettysburg Address was primarily speaking to the nation about the war. And the historical context, what was happening? We know this happened during the Civil War, the Gettysburg Address. What was the intended purpose? Also, we have this part here called new vocabulary, and students are able to pull vocabulary from the document that they might need to define, that might keep them from understanding the main parts of the text, the key perspective, and finally the significance. And I'm going to walk you through this because yes, we have this for a primary source, but we also have Thinks for secondary sources, multiple sources, and visual sources. Now, the Thinks document analysis is an easy to implement resource that gives students the tools to effectively analyze primary sources, which helps strengthen their own disciplinary thinking. Again, you choose the document from our library of primary source documents on our Thinking Nation website, and you have Thinks, and you give the students the primary source or the secondary source, and you give them this Thinks analysis sheet, and it's a great way to help them dive into primary, secondary, multiple source documents. Now, I'm going to start off first with the primary sources. So if you are on our Thinking Nation website and you decide to do a document analysis comparing the Declaration of Independence to the Declaration of Sentiments by Elizabeth Cady Stanton, you have this resource here. And so the students are given the Think sheet, and this primary source document, and they go through it and they fill it out. The great thing about Thinks is that from a teacher's point of view, it's not something you have to prep every time. It's basically you have the sheet, and what you're adapting or changing is the primary or secondary source. We also have secondary sources I've been talking about. We know that secondary source information, our textbooks tend to have our secondary sources, and so you can also have secondary source information, and we have a library of secondary sources on our Thinking Nations website. And let's say here you give the students this document, and you give them the secondary source document, and they go through it on their own or with a partner, and they're able to extract, again, the main points from this information. If you were just to give the students this graph, I think they would struggle. They would struggle to know what it's showing, what the meaning of it is, what the historical context is, what the author aimed to address. But with the Think sheet, they're able to do this. Now, we also have multiple sources. Now, I only have one source here, but we know that the feminist movement or the women's rights movement had multiple people writing during that era, and there's multiple perspectives. And so what you can do is you can give students two different perspectives, or two documents on the same perspective from two different authors, and the students go through the Think's multiple source sheets, and they're able to kind of compare and look at this document, these two documents, and get an extract. Again, I go back to that word extract, the most important information. And finally, I went back there. Finally, historical cartoons, visual sources. Visual sources on our Thinking Nation website. We have tons of visual sources, essential political cartoons that are such a big part of history. And students are able to not only look at all the text that's sometimes hard to decipher, but look at the image, and they're able to use the Think's document analysis visual source to extract the most important information. Now, each of this, and I'm not going to go into it, but if you look right here, each primary source on our Thinking Nation website is connected to a historical thinking skill. And I'm going to go into this later on, but it allows teachers not only to go through Thinks, but while they're looking at a primary source or a secondary source, they can also teach a disciplinary or historical thinking skill. And this is of huge value because not only does it reinforce the disciplinary thinking skills, but it also helps the teacher really get the most out of one of these documents. And so students aren't looking at it superficially, they're looking at it in depth. And like I said, I'm going to go over it, but on our website we have the historical thinking skills, which are a way that students can look at documents and extract the main skill from it. We have different skills that we have that we're going to go through in another presentation, but I just wanted to briefly touch it on that because on this you might have seen this historical thinking skill here. And so, one of the big questions is, okay, well, yes, we are a platform, we're a digital platform, but we actually don't recommend using things on the platform. It can be assigned there. Don't get us wrong, and it can be used there. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a huge benefit, and we're starting to get some evidence and research here on this, that students benefit from having printed sources. And so when I was teaching history, what I would do is I would print the Think's document analysis sheet. I used the interactive notebook, so I would put all 4 of them into their interactive notebook. Depending on the week, I would have a document, and I would say, all right, I'll go back to this, analyze the Declaration of Independence or the Gettysburg Address. I would give them the Gettysburg Address, and I would say, now look at your Think's document analysis for primary sources. And so they always had the sheet there. It was already printed. I didn't have to keep printing these sheets. And they would write it on a piece of paper, but they would have the document there. Now, that's one way to do it. Another way is to use the digital. It's really up to you and your style. What we want to do is give you flexibility, give you options to meet the needs, the unique needs of your students. Now, we do recommend, and our executive director, Zachary Cote, as we were going through this, recommended, and I fully believe that document analysis should be done at least one time a week. So this think sheet can become part of the weekly lessons. And so he was telling me that he would do document analysis Thursdays, and the kids get this sheet. This is something that is they can succeed in completing, and the more you do it, they understand the need of it. So thank you for watching. This again was the video on thinks, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great day.